Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. Welcome into the show, Keith. How you doing?
Doing good. Fun show this week. We're going to be looking at Middle Linebacker as our continued series of looking at individual position groups. This isn't it. There's more names here than I thought there would be when I was sitting down to research this. In my head, I don't know why I was thinking there was only like 5 guys on the roster at this position, but there's a couple more than that. But honestly, other than Bobby Wagner, any conversation has to start there. Other than Bobby Wagner, there isn't much here. So it's going to be a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're considering Jordan Brooks not starting the year, and we haven't heard that definitively yet. And I think if he does, I think we'll be just fine. If he is going to have to spend 8 weeks on IR before he comes back, yeah, we could be in trouble. Although you go take a look at Devin Bush, he's surrounded by good quality players. I think Devin Bush ends up being a decent fill-in while we're waiting for Brooks to come back. But we can talk about that in more depth.
Yeah, okay, we'll get into that in more depth when I get there. To me, this is the, other than nose tackle, where you're depending on a rookie to hold down the fort, this is the weakest position group on defense.
Yeah, for the 4th or 5th year in a row. When Bobby was here and Brooks were here in his rookie season, everything was pretty decent, but we were kind of in another scheme-ish kind of a thing. But I agree with you. Yes. Of all the position groups, both on offense and defense, I would argue this is the second weakest position group. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the fatal flaw of the defense. Yeah, because we are pretty strong. I mean, you go look at all the other position groups. We've been talking about them. After this show, we've got safeties and corners left to talk about. And those are going to be solid. We just came out of talking about edge rushers. That group was amazing with
3-4 outside. 3-4 outside linebackers is probably the strongest position on the defense, other than cornerback. And 3-4 defensive ends, the 5 and 3 tech one, is also really strong. So on the outsides, cornerback, outside linebacker, defensive end, this defense is pretty stacked. It's got a much better depth than I recognized before this series. But up the middle, nose tackle, middle linebacker, and safety, it's quite frankly not good enough.
Are you of the team building roster philosophy that you're only as good as your weakest link?
No, because I think you can scheme around weak links.
I think too.
I think not having a nose tackle hurts, but I think the fact that the offense is loaded means the offense is going to score, and defense needs to be good at defending the pass much more than defending the run. And having a nose tackle is going to be less of a big deal with teams trying to put the ball up 35 to 40 times a game on Seattle to keep up with our offense.
Yeah. And again, and you mentioned that before too. And I was like, well, what a crazy, weird philosophy for Pete Carroll to have. But
I know,
sometimes that's the way that it ends up, when you're building a roster around, and sometimes you've got a weak position group, and we do have a couple, and our offense is going to be amazing. I mean, it really is. The question is, I think the biggest question for me is how far this team can go is going to be dictated upon turnovers. Like, how many turnovers can the defense get? And if it's in the top 5 teams on turnovers and turnover ratios, this team actually could get us thing as far as the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, this is a contending team. If they can get if this team in terms of turnover differential is in the top 5, they are a contender.
Yeah.
The offense is going to be really good. The defense is going to be okay. But
Yeah.
if the defense is okay and statistically, but is getting a bunch of turnovers, that's going to be enough. It really is. Because being okay in terms of yards and that kind of stuff, the turnovers make up for a lot of those yards because it keeps points off the board or it gives your offense another shot. And with the offense being as just dynamic as it is in terms of the athletes on it, you give the offense a couple more chances per game, they're going to put points on the board and other teams aren't going to be able to keep up. So, yeah, that really comes down to it. But
is Bobby, let's get to the nuts and bolts of this show. Is Bobby a Wagner enough for this group to be successful? And I'm just talking middle linebackers here in the 3-4.
Yeah.
Is he enough to kind of pull this thing to kind of a league average group?
I don't know. Bobby Wagner has lost a step or two. He is not, if you watched him last year, he is not playing at the all pro level that he did for his entire career until he left Seattle. Maybe the last year that he was here, he also, was a little slower. He is still playing at a Pro Bowl level. He is still a damn good football player, but he isn't the one of the greatest of all times level at this point. And you know what? Like I said, he's still a really good player.
I'm gonna break with you just a little bit on that.
Okay.
It's interesting as players evolve over time. And Bobby Wagner started out really good and developed by year 3, he was an all-pro basically. And he was surrounded with a really good defense, drafted in 2012, second round, 8-time Pro Bowler, 6-time all-pro. And you're right. Lost a step. There's no question. We saw that about 3 years ago. Really. And it had to, a lot of that had to do with the knee situation. He had the knee,
which he still has
injections a couple of years in a row now, 3-4 years in a row, probably. And, but he's probably one of the smartest players in the league. True. And he's one of the most mature players in the league.
Also true.
And he's also one of the best leaders in the league.
Also true.
And so
all those things haven't changed.
I think that makes up for the speed difference because his instincts are as good as they've ever been.
True.
And
but
he's surrounded by really decent players.
He had those instincts when he was one of the fastest linebackers in the NFL. Now he has those instincts, but he's not one of the fastest linebackers in the NFL.
But he knows how to put himself in a position to be successful. You go watch his play.
He does.
LA, and you know what? Pro Football Focus had him ranked as the number 1 middle linebacker in the NFL, not on reputation, on play.
Yeah.
And so I think he's still got a little bit in the tank there, as long as he's put in a position to be successful. And I think Seattle coaches will do that.
I wasn't saying that he doesn't have anything left in the tank. I said straight up, he's still a damn good football player. I think he's a Pro Bowler. But is he still the all pro that Bobby Wagner used to be?
I think I'd take a Pro Bowler in this defense in the middle and feel pretty decent about it based on our edge rushers, our defensive ends, Cameron Young, potentially adding probably another veteran before we get into the regular season in that spot. We're just too weak. I just can't see us going any further with just Cameron Young on the roster. And then, our back end's potentially one of the best in the NFC, save maybe one club out there or two, maybe. And so that's why I asked, is Bobby Wagner enough to pull this thing along? Because I think he is. And then you add Jordan Brooks to that. If Jordan Brooks is there, even if Jordan Brooks is 95%, that group is
Yeah.
definitely enough, I think, to make this team really solid. And by really solid, I mean I think we have an opportunity to finish the regular season as a top 10 unit, both in yards allowed and points scored against and turnover ratio. And
Yeah.
and that's a really nice combo.
I don't know. Like I said, um he can Bobby Wagner is there, but he is one guy trying to play two positions. Because
What do you mean by
to him?
that?
Who plays next to him?
I think you're
You need
discounting
two
too much.
middle
These are
linebackers.
professional football players, Keith. I think you're discounting too much. You're reading too much into what people have said about Devin Bush as opposed to what Pete Carroll and Clint Hurt and Bobby Wagner are going to ask Devin Bush to do. And I
Um,
think that he's better than advertised in those things, and less so as a jumping through traffic and knocking down players. I don't know that they're necessarily going to ask him to do that. He's not that good at that, but he is good at other things, like good in coverage, good coming off the edge. You know, if he's rebounded fully from his knee and he's got the confidence, I think he can. In this defense, I think he can do really well. Now, I'm not going to take anything away from the Pittsburgh defense. That defense
that's
is solid and well
that's
coached.
that's the thing. Pittsburgh defense is solid. It's got talent. It's very well coached, and he was the weak link of that
Well,
defense.
they let him go. He was a first round draft pick in 2019,
Yeah,
and they didn't give him a fifth year option. They let him walk.
he was the weak link on that defense. Why? How and why do you believe he is going to be better? Because he was surrounded by talent. And it's a well-coached defense. They weren't asking it wasn't this isn't a situation where they were asking him to be someone he's not. They were trying to tailor the scheme around his limitations. Why
Yeah,
is it gonna be better in
he
Seattle?
played he played kind of a similar role as Jamal Adams played for this team before when he's been healthy enough to be on the field.
So, mostly never. That's a whole
Wh-
nother story.
So what I'm saying is, Devin Bush before the injury, 4.43 40, 1.50 split, which is primo, for almost 41-inch vertical, career 48 of 45 games starts, 2 interceptions, 13 pass breakups, 2 forced fumbles, 4 sacks, 286 combo tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 10 quarterback hits. So they're blitzing him, they're using him, coming around the edge, off the edge, and so forth. And in coverage, and he just doesn't have the body. He's like 5'11", 234 compared to Bobby Wagner's almost 250 pounds. He's
Mhm.
he's not a traditional middle linebacker guy. He's more of a will. And I don't know. Here's okay. I'll give you this. I don't know why they signed him to play in this scheme. So I want to know what your thoughts are and how they're going to deploy him next to Bobby Wagner.
They signed him specifically because they didn't believe Brooks was gonna be ready for week 1, and they wanted a veteran, stand-in. Until Brooks got back. They wanted something other than a cardboard standee next to, Bobby Wagner. And really that's it. He was available, he was relatively cheap, he's on an entirely cuttable contract, um, but you gotta look at Brooks. Brooks, it was a week 17 ACL injury. He then had to wait all the way until the end of January for the swelling to go down enough for them to do the surgery. So it wasn't just, oh, it's, a December injury. The surgery didn't happen until January. He won't be back for week 1. That would be absolutely unheard of. That would be a month faster than Adrian Peterson got back from his, and his was an unprecedented quick return. And now you're expecting a linebacker to do it in, you know, a month even shorter than that. It's asking for too much. Um, I want Brooks to be given the proper amount of time to get fully back because he's got to be able to do all this stuff physically, but you also have to be able to trust the knee, and that takes some time too. They need to give him an opportunity to get his body right before they throw him back on the field. And so with Brooks, I just don't.
So would the
I
Seahawks
am not counting on him until at least week 6.
would the Seahawks be better off than, in your opinion, without seeing Bush on the field during training camp? I'm just asking you in June. Would the Seahawks be better off? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little mic buzz in here. Hopefully, you guys can't hear this. Would the Seahawks be better off taking a really long look at Vi Jones or John Radigan in this role?
Yeah. I mean, you're especially in June, right? So we're talking about pre-training camp. As they get into training camp and they get into the preseason, you have to look at the kids. Bush is a known quantity. He was a first round pick. He was super athletic. He was really productive in college. He came in, he blew out his knee. The recovery from the knee surgery was abnormally poor in terms of he just didn't regain the athleticism he had. He didn't have the explosiveness that he had pre-injury, which in today's in today's NFL and whatever, like the surgeons are so good that you usually get it all back, right? That's not usually the thing, or you get most of it. And his drop off in athleticism because of the knee injury is odd. But you know what? Unfortunately, it happened, um, and so okay, he's a known quantity, you know it's there, but you need to go into this and evaluate the hell out of guys like Vi Jones and John Radigan, who the team loves. The team loves both those guys. Because if one of them can beat out Bush for that third linebacker spot, which basically means starting week, for the first 6 weeks until Brooks gets back, um, then you'd go that route. Because like Vi Jones especially is fast.
Mm-hmm.
He's got some speed. And then Radigan doesn't quite have the speed, but he's got more size and a little more savvy to him. So if either of those guys can really work out, how do you not just roll with it?
Especially next to Bobby Wagner, surrounded by a really decent defense.
Yeah.
They've got some help around them with the safeties. We've got an experienced safety group that we'll talk about next show,
Mhm.
and then up front. So it may make sense if there's going to be one spot on the roster you'd give to kind of an inexperienced guy. It might be one of those guys.
Yeah, and I would rather give it to one of those guys.
Really?
I
I
think
mean,
so.
what do you know about Bush that's really kind of throwing you? Other than just his stats, and he didn't live up to the first round thing. I mean, top 10
Oh,
pick.
I went kinda yeah, he was a top 10 pick, and as a rookie, he looked solid. Like, he looked like he was gonna be the thing, but then he got the knee injury, and when he came back, he just looked slow, he didn't look explosive, and he's never really regained that form. Watch a little tape from him, and you see a guy that's a step late, getting to where he needs to be, um, like, especially against the run, right? If he was a step further, one more step closer to the line, he'd be in position to make a tackle, but he's not. And so the running back's able to get by him. And you see that over and over and over again. And it would be different if he was playing on a team where, the front wasn't very good. Um, and so he was having to dig through traffic more, or, um, the other linebackers were in a situation where he was pausing a step because he needed to be able to read multiple gaps, as far as what's going on, but he wasn't. He's playing in Pittsburgh, and as much as, us up here in the Northwest don't necessarily like Pittsburgh, you have to admit that it's a very well coached defense. The guys know what they're doing, and it's a talented defense. They know what they're doing. They know what's expected to them. They get to the right spots. And Bush was just a step late. every single time.
Yeah, up until last year, Keith Butler was his defensive coach, and Keith Butler spent time with the Seahawks when he was a
Yes, he
young
did.
pup as a linebacker. Um, I just want to wait and see. I think from Devin Bush what there is. Obviously, the team signed him and signed him for a cheap contract, and I just want to see if there's something there that the team can work with and adds to the unit. I mean, I don't know that it's going to be necessarily any worse than what we've had in the last 2 or 3 years at that position.
Well, I mean, last year you had a healthy Jordan Brooks, who is before this injury, super fast, super athletic, all of those things, and an underrated. Okay, the name just skipped my mind.
It skipped my head too. Sorry,
Oh,
I
genius.
was hoping you'd have it.
B last name is not Nick Bellore. But the the two middle linebackers, they athletically, um, were solid. That's a good group. And before that, you had Bobby Wagner, a younger Bobby Wagner, and in this, in the middle. So you're like, oh, it's been better than in the last 2 or 3 years. I think this is
I
the
mean, I don't think
weakest.
it's gonna be worse.
I
I
think
don't know that it's gonna be better, but
this is the weakest the middle linebacker group has been
I think
since
last year was.
Bobby Wagner was drafted in 2012.
Yeah.
Because last year they had 2 guys, and this year they have 1. And it happens to be, Bobby Wagner, who's, 2 years older from the last time we saw him.
Yeah. Well, it was Jordan Brooks and a career backup dude. And then yeah, interesting.
And now it's
I
an older Bobby Wagner
Yeah.
and a guy that's probably not in the league a year from
Yeah,
now.
and I still think that Bobby Wagner's got enough to carry this group. I really do. And who knows on Jordan Brooks? They were pretty bullish on him having an opportunity to come back possibly by the first of the season. Usually that doesn't work out. I
It won't.
will grant you this.
I have it's not just my own cynical nature, just the pure, um, what would be expected of him in terms of recovery, healing, rehab, all those things to get his body back into the right spot. When you can't work out and run and do any of those things for a long time, you've really got to build up strength and flexibility and everything once you're allowed to, which because of the late surgery means, we're in June, he may or may not be doing those things now. And the idea that he would get back to 100%, you know, by September is like he has there's a lot of atrophy that happens in that leg. He's got to build up a lot of strength to get back to where he was. And I think it's unreasonable to ask him to and expect him to be ready to go. No one else is coming back that quickly. Like I said, Adrian Peterson is um, the absolute fastest that we've ever seen anyone come back from an ACL injury, and he had a month longer. Like his surgery was a month earlier than Brooks's. So,
By the way, the player we've been both trying to look for and remember is Cody Barton.
Barton,
So
I said linebacker with a
now
B name that's not Bellore.
now and I don't need to remind you this, but I'm going to. Um, the the room last year with Brooks earning his first really kind of premier starting kind of role with the defense, calling the plays, having the green sticker on his helmet next to Barton, a career backup who maybe earned an opportunity, but nonetheless, Keith, we talked about it before the season. That was the weakest link on the defense, and we were kind of
Mhm.
upset that they really didn't address that in the offseason, bringing at least somebody um, that had some competence there as
How
in a
is
starting role.
how is that worse than what there is now?
Well, because you got Bobby Wagner back.
You still have one player who can play that you
Yeah.
know of,
Yeah, and
and
Bobby Wagner's better than Jordan Brooks. I love Jordan Brooks. He's great. Eh, but Bobby Wagner. So,
still, you have one player who can play. Last year, you had Cody
Devin
Barton.
Bush is better than Cody Barton.
Hell no.
Yes, he is.
Hell no.
Yes, he is.
That's not even remotely true. That might be the most homer thing you've ever said on this show.
Devin Bush. Well, if I was a homer, I'd be all over Cody Barton, but I'm not. Cody Barton was a league average player.
Yes, he was a league average player. He was better than a lot of the fans thought. But he was a
And I
league
think Devin
average
Bush
player.
is a league average player.
Devin Bush hasn't been a league average player since he came back from his knee injury. He's had 3 years of being a
I think he's
below average
underrated,
player.
dude. I
He
don't
is
think
a
so.
he
I
is
don't
a
think so. You go
significantly
look at
inferior player.
No, you go look at the grades. He's got middling grades. They're, in the low 60s. I'll give you that. But so did Cody Barton. Cody Barton had coverage grades that were a little higher, but tackling grades, dude, he missed so many tackles. He had one of the highest missed tackle rates in the NFL and a low tackle grade. Devin Bush is right in the middle of, in the 60 to 65 range in both pass coverage and tackling. He's not as 2
fast.
interceptions, 13 pass breakups, 2
He's
forced
not as
fumbles, 4
fast. He's
sacks,
not as athletic.
286 combo tackles. All those blow Cody Barton out of the water. And I'm just saying that,
and he played in a much better defense.
Yeah.
Better defense.
Statistically. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll give you that.
He had better talent around him. He had a scheme that fit him better.
I think we're just underselling Devin Bush.
I don't.
Wait until he shows up.
Yeah. And I still think that Cody Barton was better than fans give him credit for. He had a couple of really bad games where he missed a lot of tackles.
Over pursues.
But his
angles are just awful.
He also had some good games. And then go look at the Bush tape. And tell me that there's anything that you would say about Cody Barton that isn't also true about Devin Bush.
All
the
right.
only difference is
I'll take you up on that challenge.
Instead of taking bad angles, he's simply just too slow to get there. That's the difference.
Okay. I don't think so, but we'll see.
But you've got one player, you've got one backup quality player next to him, and you've got nothing behind them. It's essentially the same situation as last
It is essentially the same. But
because as good as Bobby Wagner is, he is no longer the athletic freak he was when he came into the league. And so you've still got one player and for 2 spots, and you've gotten slower and less athletic.
With Jordan Brooks in the wings.
Mid-season.
So it's slightly better. And then you've got, of course, Nick Bellore. You kind of threw his name out there haphazardly earlier, Keith, but we need to give him his due. Come on.
He
34 years old, 6'1", 250. He's the largest linebacker on the team. So that's going for him. And in a pinch, dude, he can play fullback for you. He can play special teams. He is
a special teams player and nothing else.
He's the second highest paid. He's the 45th highest paid linebacker in the entire NFL, Keith.
He's not a linebacker. They list him on as a linebacker because you have to put a position next to him, and they're not allowed to put special teams as a position. That's what he is. He is the special teams captain. He is practically a coach.
Add that to his resume. Special teams captain.
He's practically a coach on special teams. He is here 100% of the way to be a special teams guy, and honestly, he's really freaking good at it. But
and he's the funniest guy on the team.
I've heard that. but he's a great locker room presence. But when you see him out there on the field, watch the preseason games from last year. It's not pretty.
How many did he take more offensive snaps last year or defensive snaps, Keith? Your guess.
I'm going to say defense.
How many defensive snaps do you think he took all season?
24.
How many offensive snaps?
14.
Wow.
How'd I do?
Well, you give him a lot of credit. This is 17 on offense.
17.
Yeah,
I was only 2%.
2% of the offensive snaps that he was available for, and then 9 defensive snaps, 1%.
Wow, so it was a lot less than I thought.
Yeah, but 352 special team snaps.
When
Yeah,
Cody Barton got nicked up in a game, and I thought I remembered it falling on Bellore to come in and play, and I didn't realize it was only 9 snaps. That's why I
I
thought it
think
was
that was the
more.
year. I think the year prior he had a lot more defensive snaps.
Maybe
I
that's
think,
what it was.
yeah, yeah, because
Um,
there was like a stretch of 4 or 5 games there where that we saw way too much of him.
yeah, Nick Bellore has value, and I know that his presence
Four
on the
million
roster,
dollars.
that is probably more than he's worth. But his presence on the roster pisses some people off because he offers nothing to the defense. But special teams matters in the NFL. It absolutely does. And he is one of the best in the entire league at what he does.
Yeah, as far back as I can remember, Keith, Seattle has designated a really, pretty much a special team specialist
Yep.
on this roster, and it just happens to be Nick Bellore, and it has been for the last. This will be what his 5th or 6th season with
Yep.
Seattle. All right, and then
Let's talk about the kids because
yeah. So
there's a
I
couple kids on this roster that I like. One
okay,
is Vi Jones.
yeah,
Um, a he spent last year mostly on the practice squad. He's a little old for a guy that's got one practice squad here only, but he's 6'2", 225, slightly undersized. He's already 25 years old. Oddly, he's older than Devin Bush, who has 5 years
interesting.
in the league.
That is funny. He had
Um,
43 special team snaps in 2022.
yes,
They
he
like
had.
him. They like him a lot.
Yep. He
So
was able to get
we'll
it.
see.
He started on the practice squad most of the year on the practice squad, got himself up onto the roster. I was shocked when he got cut.
He had a great
He had a
preseason last year.
great camp, great preseason, and given the complete lack of depth at middle linebacker, I thought he had a spot.
If
Um,
Nick Bellore did not exist as a human being, it would have been by Jones.
yeah, but they gave Nick Bellore the spot. And then the other thing is they got Vi Jones through onto the practice squad, which means that when they needed him, they could elevate him onto the um, onto the game day roster. And then later in the season, when there were injuries, they could they could just activate him and put him on the 53. So, which they did, and so he was able to get on in there in special teams. He's quick. The kid's got some speed. He's undersized, but
If I
he's
was
super
if I
athletic.
was Vi Jones, if you were Vi Jones, right? You're taking a look at this roster. You got Bobby Wagner coming back. That's got to be exciting to you. You know Brooks is hurt.
Hmm.
You've got Devin Bush, who's washed as a first round draft pick.
Yeah.
If I was Vi Jones, I would have worked my ass off this offseason to get myself
Yep.
in a primo spot. I would have been in that building every day in the weight room around the coaches,
Yep.
diving into the playbook
I
and
would have
just
put on
literally I just would have lived there.
I would
And
have put on 5 to 10 pounds of muscles, and I would then be 230 to 235, which puts him at the same weight range as Devin Bush, but he's faster, he's more explosive, he's more athletic.
he's taller.
Um, he's 3
Got
inches
more length.
taller.
Yeah, yeah.
And give him a chance to go win that spot. Um, like I said, I thought he had a spot last year. He was with the third unit, and so was a lot of the second half and fourth quarter against guys that didn't make it into the league and whatnot. But there were times when he was the best player on the field in those situations. Um, I like him. I actually think, given all things being equal, if it was, you ignore contracts and whatnot, um, Brooks is hurt and not doesn't start the year. Vi Jones has a chance at that starting job. I really think so.
I do too. And he should. But you know who the team likes even more?
John
John
Radigan,
Radigan.
which
Yeah.
we've never seen.
Age
He's
24. He's
Yep.
appeared in 5 games in 2022, had 96 special team snaps, 70% of the snaps available that he could have taken during those 5 games. But nonetheless, it took him a while to come back last year. He was still recovering
Mhm.
from a knee. So they kept him on IR until the midseason, basically. But they really do like him. They like him a lot as
Yep.
a person, as a player, as a leader, as a guy that just works his ass off. Um, So that competition right there is
He's
actually
much more of an
one of the
old
most interesting guys.
he's much more of an old school linebacker. He's not as fast, doesn't have that, but he is he- he's he's really strong, like he's physical, he squares people up, he tackles really well. Um is a kind of a more old school middle linebacker. Uh, Whereas Vi Jones is more of, fast, undersized, like be all over the place. Um, I want to see John Radigan this training camp because yeah, he hurt his, I think he hurt his knee and he would miss like half the season last year. And even once he got back, he never really got a look. Um, because when Jordan Brooks did finally get hurt, by then Tanner Muse had kind of taken that spot, but Muse is
Yeah.
gone.
And Cody
And
Barton ended up playing well enough to start the entire season. So
yeah, like, he had some games where it was rough, but then he turned it around and actually had some other games where he was really good, or at least good. I wouldn't say really good, but overall it balanced out to being about league average. Um, you know, but John Radigan is a guy that, had he not been hurt, very well could have pushed Cody Barton for snaps early in the season.
I agree.
Um, and now we get a chance to see him. He's gotta stay healthy, and he's gotta come out and show us what is it that the linebacker coaches, the position coaches love about him, because we haven't seen enough of him, with the defense, even during the preseason, to get an idea of exactly what he's about, and is he as good as we keep being told he is?
Yeah. I keep hearing from like guys that are around the team a little bit, like Corbin Smith, bring
Mhm.
John Radigan's name up more than once this offseason as a player to watch. And so I'm paying attention to that a little bit and kind of seeing what happens there. All right. There's a couple
Mhm.
of undrafted guys. I had Cam Bright on this list because I think they would probably move him inside on a roster.
Yep.
In college, he kind of played a will. Same with Patrick O'Connell. We talked about Patrick O'Connell in our last show a little bit as a kind of an edge player that possibly would be moved inside. We just
6'1",
haven't had this. Go
6'1",
ahead.
227. So we talked about him as an edge player. I think he's more of a middle linebacker, but um, he's a guy that had a lot of tackles in college, but played, kind of on a lower level
Hmm.
team. Cam Bright, um, you know, is about the same size, 6 foot, 228. Um, but he's an athlete. He goes from
And
playing on the
strong.
outside, yeah, playing on the outside now he's got to learn how to play in the middle. Um, and yeah, on the bench press when it comes to like the testing, 99th percentile,
Hmm.
right? Seriously, and broad jump, 94th percentile. Just better than everybody else at those things. Got good wingspan, good length, um, but isn't particularly athletic in terms of his agility score or I guess his 40 times good. Um, but, you know, way undersized. The first percentile, in terms of weight for a middle linebacker. Um,
Well,
we'll
he
see.
was listed at the his pro day at 219 pounds. You
Yeah,
mentioned 229. I don't know where he's at, right now, but
that's what he's that's what he's listed at on the Seahawks roster,
okay.
and
So
that might be wishful thinking.
so we'll see. I mean, there's just a couple guys there right now. They're just camp bodies, and we'll find out how that happens. But I agree, this is one of the weaker spots on the roster, especially until Brooks comes back. If Brooks comes
Mhm.
back and pairs with Bobby Wagner down the stretch, this could end up being a decent unit that comes around just at the right time to infuse Seattle with some talent there to put them over the hump
Brooks
on
and
their
Bobby
defense.
Brooks and Bobby together in the middle of this defense was what they envisioned when they drafted Jordan Brooks. It didn't work out cap wise and all those things to keep Bobby around last year. And now they've got Bobby back, but Brooks is hurt. At some
Right.
point, I do hope we get to see Brooks and Bobby together in the middle of this defense, because I think special things will happen. I really do.
No matter what happens, well, I mean, they could sign both players next year, but both players are in their last year of a contract. Wagner's 1 year deal. Brooks is at the end of his 4th year on his rookie contract. Did not have the 5th year option extended to him,
Yep.
especially with the unknowns about being
That was
hurt and so
yep,
forth.
that was an injury issue. That's why that wasn't picked up.
So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, he can play himself into it and do a decent deal with Seattle. It might be a 1 year deal, just a prove it deal,
Mhm.
and I'm talking 2024. Just because that's sometimes the way these things work when you come back mid-season from injury and you're in the contract year. So, um, interesting group. I think that I feel a little bit better about it than you do, but nonetheless, the only reason I feel a little bit better about it is because we've got a really nice, decent back end to kind of cover their back. Um, and then on the front, the edges are just so good. So I'm a little concerned about the primary position that helps them the most, which is nose tackle,
Mhm.
on this roster. But we'll
That's the other
see. We'll
part.
see. Yeah.
You look at this defense, and where it's weak is up the middle, right? Nose tackle, right in the center of the defensive line, the middle linebacker spot next to Bobby Wagner, right in the middle of the linebacker group. And honestly, I know you keep talking up the safeties. Um, I think there's concern there, and we'll get into that next show.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. I love these shows.
Yep. I will say
Let's
that the overall, I think it's pretty clear that the defense has improved. Even with the mis even with the issues at nose tackle and middle linebacker. Those issues were there. I mean, okay, maybe not nose tackle, but the defensive ends are so much better than last year. The outside linebackers are so much better than last year. Um, Overall, this is a significantly better defense, and I think that needs to be said, because even though as I, like, go through and I'm like, "No, they have these major problems," I'm not saying that it's all doom and gloom. This defense is significantly better. There's that.
one final note has nothing to do with the defense. I've got some bad news.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. One of our favorite undrafted rookie free agents was cut
What?
off of this roster.
Who?
You're gonna be devastated. CJ Johnson, wide receiver.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder why.
Well, they re-signed a defensive tackle. I don't have the name in front of me, but yeah, they're
Y
just shuffling
Yep,
players around like they do this time of the year. But
yep.
CJ Johnson, that surprised me a little bit.
I actually was yeah, that's surprising. CJ Johnson had a chance, I thought, to, make it as the 6th wide receiver, a
But
special teams guy.
I've heard that they like Jake Bobo so well that
I've heard Jake I keep hearing Jake Bobo's name.
yeah,
The 6'5" guy with
no
no
speed,
speed or whatever, but he's
right?
freaking 6'5", which makes him impossible to cover, because even if he's covered, he's not really covered. Um,
Sometimes when you don't have any speed, but you do everything else really well, that's all that matters.
well, and being 6'5" helps.
Yeah, truly.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
but I thought that was interesting because I thought CJ Johnson, when you take a look at the film with the other guy, the quarterback that we talked about, Holton Allers,
mhm,
we both mentioned when you go look at Holton Allers throw the ball for what is it, Eastern Carolina.
yeah.
Um, CJ Johnson's the name that keeps popping up
Yeah,
as the guy that's receiving all his balls. So
you go to watch Holton Oller's tape, and you come away from it going, CJ Johnson is an NFL player. You don't come away from it thinking that Holton Ollers
right,
necessarily is an NFL player. You come away with it thinking that CJ Johnson is. So it is surprising a little bit,
but
but
our wide receiver room
the
is
wide
pretty
receiver room
decent.
is it's kind of loaded,
Yeah.
and we don't know what happened with because right they've been going through OTAs, and if he goes out there and has a crummy attitude, or just isn't picking up the offense, isn't doing what the coaches want. Okay, let's go try someone else.
Yeah.
It's that time of year.
Yeah,
You want to make
it
the
is.
roster, especially as an undrafted guy. Get with the program, man. You got to do those little things.
All right, you heard it from Keith. Get with the program. Follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. Follow me at NWC Hawk. You can follow the show at Hawks Playbook. Seahawksplaybook.com is the website. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. When you do, hit the subscribe button to make sure you get all the shows into your feed every week. 2 or 3 shows a week, even in the off season. YouTube channel. We've got lots of subscribers there. Join the crowd. Hit that subscribe button and help us out. So until next time, go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWCHawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.